God is so good that Jesus is quoted saying there's actually no one good but God, not a single one. Any so-called goodness you have ever experienced was felt in spite of the fact sinful man is actually incapable of producing it, which literally makes God's standard of goodness incomprehensible. Romans 3 and 10 through 12. As it is written, there is none righteous. No, not one. There is none that understandeth. There is none that seeketh after God. This is Jesus talking. They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good. No, not one. How good is God? He is so good that you've yet to even experience what good is. Imagine for a second, this might help. Your idea of good or great or anything pleasant on this planet would be something you have experienced through man. And God is saying here that man is incapable of good. So what you know to be good is like the shell of what good actually is. Now, we don't eat the shell of a shrimp and say, man, this is good. We eat the shrimp if we like seafood and we say, man, this is good. But imagine for a moment if it was proper to eat the shell of a shrimp, ignoring the actual flesh of the shrimp, just eating the shell and saying, man, this is amazing. Like we've never encountered the actual flesh of the shrimp. We've never seen or felt or experienced the actual flesh of the shrimp. It's a heavenly thing. And what we have on earth is the shell. And we eat the shell and we enjoy the shell. And the shell is like, man, this is delicious. This is tasty. Then we get raptured by Jesus and we go to heaven and we will be in glorified bodies that are capable of doing what Jesus' body was able to do after he was risen from the dead. You know, teleporting and moving at speeds of light or even faster, instantaneous movement, the things that Jesus is capable of, we will be capable of because we will have that body following the rapture. Now, we're in heaven, having never experienced the flesh of a shrimp, but thinking that shell was the bee's knees and the best thing since sliced bread. It was delicious. Then we go to heaven and we eat because Jesus ate after he broke bread after he rose from the dead. So we'll still be eating, even though there's no hunger. We'll still be enjoying food. And when we're eating the shrimp, the flesh of the shrimp, for the first time ever in heaven, thinking that the shell was good, the difference will be night and day. I thought that might have been an effective example of what we consider to be good being nowhere near good, according to God. And that is how good God is. So if in his goodness and faithfulness he multiplies talents, if in his goodness and faithfulness he maximizes resources, then you got to imagine how many dark steppers, how many lake of fire residents are going to be multiplied and made use of in his goodness and faithfulness to reach the subset of sinners that were otherwise unreachable. And keep in mind, his supply, his provision always supersedes the demand, the need. That's a lot of us. That's a lot of Gentiles dwelling behind Dad's throne. So, food for thought. And what about faithful? Psalm 36 and 5. Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Lamentations 3 and 22 through 23. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. If God's goodness and faithfulness, as depicted by the master's goodness and faithfulness in the parable of the talents, is what provokes God to multiply even the smallest of talents or resources, and that faithfulness extends even beyond the clouds, put it together. That means the sky's the limit to what we'll witness of his audacity as it correlates with keeping sinners out of that fiery lake by reaping righteous human life from the wicked jaws of sin and death, all for Jesus, making that newfound life more abundant in every sense of the word salvation, and ultimately glorifying the Son through his precious bride, which is the ever-growing church of Jesus Christ. But allow me to shine a brighter light onto that audacity. These two words, I told you to keep them in mind. His goodness and his faithfulness. It is by these two things intertwined that dictates his standard for multiplication of a talent or resource. Some examples of what his goodness and faithfulness look like with regard to multiplication of a talent or resource. Wrap your head around these examples. You'll have a mercurial idea, a faint idea of what a lateral move, a horizontal move might look like. Beholding God's goodness and faithfulness, shown by his multiplying of talents/resources. What we know of his production standards. His good far exceeds man's idea of good. Romans 3 and 10 through 12. His faithfulness is great, reaching the clouds. Psalm 36 and 5, Lamentations 3 and 22 through 23. Exhibit A. Talents given him. 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. What did he do with that? The result, he fed 5,000 men and X amount of women and children. My understanding, or as it was taught to me, there's always more women and children, probably even double the amount of men. So if he fed 5,000 men, it's fair to assume he fed at least as many women and children with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. After eating their fill, not after eating just enough, after eating as much as they wanted to, as much as they felt like eating, there were 12 hamper baskets full of leftovers when he began with just 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. It's worth mentioning the multitude was fed to satiation, and they very likely stored what they couldn't eat for later. So the 12 baskets of leftovers was probably what this multitude failed to carry on their persons. Like loading up their shirts with and filling their pockets with, and continuing on with exhibit B of beholding God's goodness and faithfulness with regard to multiplying talents and resources. What we know of his production standards is it's good, far exceeding man's idea of good, and faithful, full of faithfulness. Great is his faithfulness, the other determining factor in his multiplication of talent and resources. This faithfulness reaches the clouds. Exhibit B, talents given him, 7 loaves. This time an unnumbered amount of small fish, a few. And the result was he fed 4,000 men and X amount of women and kids, with the result of 7 hamper baskets of leftovers. This is a bit less than the previous example, but God does what he does for a reason. My understanding is the previous example was for the 12 Israel tribes, and this miracle, this sign, points to the 7 Gentile nations. I mean, he can do as many as he wants to. He can provide, he can produce as many as he chooses to. 4,000 men, X amount of women and kids. Here's 7 hamper baskets full of leftovers after you've eaten your fill, after you've piled on all that you can take and hold on your person. And this is example 2 of his goodness and faithfulness, where it pertains to multiplying talents and resources. Exhibit C. Do I have to, keep repeating the intro? Talents given him, a dead man's outstanding debt, and empty vessels gathered from the neighbors, from people in the vicinity, by his wife, the widow. Result? A miraculously bottomless cruise poured out enough oil to fill every empty vessel which was gathered by the widow. The oil collection paid off her hubby's debt, and it didn't stop there, because remember, he always exceeds the demand, right? He over answers your prayer, right? In addition to that, the leftover oil was enough to comfortably sponsor the rest of her and her 2 sons' family life. They were provided for from that point on with the remaining oil, with the oil that she had left over. Exhibit D. In beholding God's goodness and faithfulness, which is better than man's idea of it, and reaching the clouds, respectively. The talents that you give him, your want, your need, whatever demand you have of God, your provider, the result will be his provision will always exceed your demand for his supply, be this in the area of health, wealth, relationships, or happiness, or any combination of the four. Nothing is too big for God. No problem is too big for God. No demand is too great for his supply. So now that you're getting an idea of his goodness and faithfulness, when they work in tandem toward this goal right here, it'll open up your expectations. In the face of such monumental skill and talent, where it comes to the flipping of talents, it's clear as day, given the examples we just detailed, with all the darkness represented by this list, God is being given a tremendous amount of talents and resources to multiply. So much so that making porn stars or whoremongers will barely be scratching the surface. Those with a license to kill and an itchy trigger finger will pop skulls outside of the digital realm to their heart's content, and scientists will marvel at and revel in their chemically mass-murdering handiwork. Tarot card readers will guide many along a more peaceful path for the right price, and porn stars will keep many entertained with their God-given assets. Therefore, I suppose it's a damn good thing that he, in his wisdom and mercy, made sure we would absolutely enjoy almost every minute of it. Philippians 2:13. For God it is who is working in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Notice that word good again. Recall that his standard reaches the heavens. What this tells me is that our dark desire, including but not limited to whoremongers, think of that list. Our dark desires and God's good pleasure are one and the same. This may be why you, despite your God-given righteousness, feel like a bad person. Because it may be that God planted within you a dark talent to multiply, in service of his goodness and faithfulness. And you, without the insight this video is now granting, have been mistaking the urges and sentiments you've harbored your entire life, which correlate with the dark talent within you, for an addiction or a form of bondage in need of his purging. Meanwhile, this dark influence was never something to be delivered from, but instead, through your questionable desires, have been pointing you to your inheritance in Christ all along. This will not be true of everyone who feels pulled to a specific form of traditionally known wrongdoing. Not every believer has been given a dark mission, but if you are one of them, this will click for you in such a way that your life experiences point to this having your name written all over it, like the biggest epiphany you have ever had. The degree to which that sounds absolutely outrageous to someone who believes justification comes by the Ten Commandments is the degree to which an unshakable bedrock for grace had to be instilled. And that is exactly what God ordained his Dektos time for, otherwise known as the acceptable year of the Lord. First hinted at in Isaiah 61:2, and once again in Luke 4:19. But specifically, when did God proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord for? God's Dektos time, Isaiah 61:2, and Luke 4:19, is also known as the acceptable year of the Lord. According to Bible scholar Joseph Henry Taylor, Dektos time, or the acceptable year of the Lord, is translated as being the most blessed time where the salvation and the free favors of God profusely abound. Now, God's salvation without Dektos time is already undepletable. It's already sufficient. He said so. My grace is sufficient for you. But here we are with, I guess, infinitely more of it. The most blessed time where the salvation and the free favors of God. Salvation it's already free, and it's already grace, which is favor. So here we are with, I don't even want to say a double portion, because I could be understating it here, but the most blessed time where the salvation, remember how loaded that word was, and the free favors of God even further profusely abound. If there was ever a time where such an immeasurable, unquantifiable portion, helping amount of God's salvation and free favors were needed to profusely abound, it's probably going to be in a time where darkness covers the earth and deep darkness the people. The sin problem was abundantly answered before. How much more now? Well, when else could such a monumentally gracious period be useful, if not now? In humanity's darkest time, where the world says what's evil is good and what's good is evil, what's right is wrong, now is the time for the rubber of faith righteousness to meet the road of the darkest times humanity has seen thus far, where God must now use this deeper grade of darkness, like a good and faithful steward, entrusted with talents, to multiply his faith righteousness, so that men, despite being evil and favoring the darkness over the light, may be rescued from eternal damnation and live instead of die. That's what he came here for. But he must do this through men. Keep that in mind. Men like you, me, your sister, your brother, your mother, your father, your friends, and strangers alike. He's calling those already in the darkness to bloom within the darkness they've been planted in, instead of constantly attempting in vain to put your best foot forward and walk according to the 10 Commandments.